All right, the magical wait is over. Welcome to Destination the Show, episode 16. Here with my guy Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, what's up, man? How are you?
You know, I'm excited for this episode. Excited to talk Twins ball. I mean, you've had a little bit of issues in the
Tech
pre-production,
issues.
so we've got to talk to our guest a little bit and run some things by him about you when you weren't listening. So I'm
Good
excited to
times.
see what's about to happen.
Good times. How do you like my mood lighting, man? What do you think?
I mean, it's something.
No comment. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move straight ahead. Super excited to have a guest joining us on the show today. Previewed this last week that we're going to be digging in much more depth to the minor league systems of the three teams we spend the most time talking about here. So today we're going to kick it off with the Minnesota Twins. And who better to speak to the Twins minor league system than someone who's kind of the OG of Minnesota Twins YouTube, and that is Tom Froemming. Tom, welcome, man. How are you?
What's up, guys? I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to be talking Twins baseball in December. This is going to be awesome.
Heck yeah. Thanks for joining us. Tom, the last time I saw you.
Oh, God.
The last time I saw you, I think I was literally picking up your corpse off.
You were cleaning drinks I'd spilled on you off of yourself and picking me off of,
picking you up
me off of the concourse of Target Field. Yeah,
that's right, man. The last time you and I and Theo were together in person was wild card game 1 against the Blue Jays, breaking the curse. Man, what a magical day that was, despite some of the shenanigans along the way.
Yeah, man, we brought it. Target Field brought it. That was just insane. You know, being a part of that crowd, having some fun, just going nuts with you guys at the Royce Lewis home runs. I've never been a part of a crowd like that. I did not know what to expect. I thought the Twins would win, but when they did, my body left where I was. It was I don't even know what happened. It was unreal. I was on the ground on the Target Field concourse crying when they sealed it. Legitimately.
This is true.
And I'm glad I have some eyewitnesses because that happened. And
I also think there is decent video footage of you kind of collapsing on the ground too, correct?
I think Theo's got some, yeah. But yeah.
Is this where he breaks in with the video?
Oh God,
that would be incredible.
It's not on my computer; it's on my phone. So for Tom's sake, we're not going to show it today.
We'll hold it as leverage.
There. Yeah, when Tom annoys us next, that's when I pull it out.
And I purposely avoid the big crowd games. I don't like to be in big crowds really. I like Target Field when it's kind of half empty. So I'll go when they have a weekday day game. I'll take the day off and go there and spread out and relax. I've never been in a atmosphere like that ever. And then to be at a place where I'm usually chilling, or I have my kids there or whatever, and just be so into it. It was a crazy day. So much
crazy
fun.
It was. Also recall Matthew Taylor, fellow Twins Daily writer, taunting some Blue Jays fans who are sitting right in front of us.
Oh, yeah. Those guys.
He is really giving it to them.
I was just like, I'm gonna mediate this because they were looking like they wanted to fight.
Well, they're Canadians. What do you?
Yeah, they were ready.
I don't think they were Canadians. I think they were just some posers coming in from.
We were juiced up enough to be like, let's
and I'm like,
these guys. And then they were like twice as big as we. Yeah, Theo. We were lucky we had Theo with us. That would have not gone well for us.
We would have got absolutely crushed for sure. Jeremy, remind us where you were during game 1 of the wild card series.
That was on a football field coaching 7th grade football, because that's what I do. I mean, I got the kids, and we were working on an innovative 7th grade football offense, and I had the game on my phone, the radio version, and so I would call a play, and then I would turn around and go listen to what was happening. But yeah, I'm jealous that I didn't get to experience that. So as much as I'm laughing on the outside at your guys' story, I cry a little bit on the
Crying
inside.
on the inside. There you go.
There's always next season.
And I'll be there. But actually, I'll be coaching football again. But you know what I mean.
Right on.
Make it work out.
Good times. Amazing day that was. Well, before we dig in, Tom, to questions we've gotten other folks have for you about the twin system, figure we start off by asking you a little bit about your kind of journey in content creation, right? Because you started out, I think, writing at Twins Daily. You've edited at Twins Daily. You now have a very popular Twins themed YouTube channel. So tell us a little bit about that, and most importantly, where folks who might not be aware can find your stuff, even though pretty much everyone who's listening to this should be plenty aware.
Well, I would send you to my YouTube channel first. TF Twins is what that's called, but you can find my stuff a lot of other places, including Twins Daily still. I've been at this a long time. If you want to be technical about it, I started kind of doing this kind of stuff 20 years ago. And kind of washed up on the shores of Twins Daily after a lot of things weren't successful. I was not successful for like 12 years before I washed up on the shores of Twins Daily. And they welcomed me in. And that was in like 2016, I think. And then, kind of gained some traction there. Really, the door opened for me there because they needed minor league report writers. Each day of the week, there's a minor league report at Twins Daily. Back then, and they weren't having as much success finding people writing. It was a little trickier to find writers. So that's what kind of got me in, and then started doing some game recaps there, which those were really popular. And then ended up doing a lot of behind the scenes work at Twins Daily. And then that sort of led to me putting more investment into my YouTube channel. And then really once I kind of got stepped back from Twins Daily and kind of tried to figure out, well, what do I want to add to the scene, which is kind of what I've been thinking about a lot. There's so much awesome Twins content. We are so lucky as Twins fans.
Yeah.
And especially now, like it wasn't always the case that like all the traditional media people are awesome. I think. And then you throw in that The Athletic, that totally changed the game. Having Dan and Aaron covering Aaron back to covering the Twins is like dream come true as a Twins fan. Missed him doing that for so long when he was at other places. We're just so lucky to be in this. So, I'm always trying to add something new. And that was kind of the thing was like, well, somebody should do like a show every night of showing the prospect highlights, and I mix in some Twins stuff too, but it's mainly the prospect highlights. Now, on that vein, I just want to give you guys some love too. Sweet 16 episode. This is adding to the scene as well. The MLB draft, even for someone like me, who I feel like I go pretty deep, I'm not looking at the top 10, top 20, top 30 prospects. I'm looking at everybody. I still cannot fathom like being as in touch with the draft as you guys are. So this is such an awesome resource for Twins fans and Brewers fans and Cubs fans and anybody that wants to know about the draft. Absolutely love your stuff. Appreciated all the lottery explanation you guys were doing in the recent episode. So I always learn stuff on here. So you guys are doing a great job on here.
Appreciate
Amen. That. Yeah, we sure appreciate that. Encourage folks, if you haven't already, to check out Tom's YouTube page, Essential Viewing, both during and in the off season. Speaking of the off season, you can tell things are moving slow, Tom, for the Twins, because I've seen people tweeting at you saying, I miss Tom's minor league daily recaps. How are you feeling about the off season, man? Are you impatient? Are you stressed about the Twins not really doing anything yet? What's your take on a I would say typically slow moving Twins off season?
I think I've calibrated to the Falvey calendar is how I would put it. It doesn't feel good to see all these things happening, and to know the Twins haven't done anything. But you understand there is still an inventory of players that are available on the free agent market. I'm not sure they're going to do much there, but there's guys that are going to get traded that probably haven't even had a trade whisper about at this point. The things just take time to develop. If I had my way, they would not string things along so far. It feels doesn't feel great as from a fan's perspective, but I kind of understand this is the way they operate, and I'm confident they're going to address some of the issues with the roster that they have.
Yep. I think we're on the same page, and noted your video the other day, which essentially was like, Twins fans, we need to chill, because it's pretty much like this every season. It'll happen eventually.
So you've come back, Jamie, from the disappointment of not having action, because you were pretty much like, we need something to happen, and I'm like, just it's not going to happen. Not this.
I gave up. You're right.
It's hard. It's hard, but the way I've put it is that Chez Falvey doesn't open until January. You were on the waiting list. They're not open yet. Wait until January, and then once it gets to late January, I think I'll be the one. That video will be like, everybody freak out. I'll be the first one freaking out. I can promise you that.
Right on. I kind of want to see that. I'm not gonna lie. Well, we're excited, man. I cannot wait to dig into the Twins system with you. I feel like there are very few people who spend as much time on a daily basis or have like the depth of knowledge of the Twin system that you do. So I guess maybe we'll kind of start high level, and then we can kind of dig into some guys kind of one at a time, and we'll start at the top and make our way to what I think is going to be the most fun part, which is the like under the radar guy questions. But Tom, man, what are your thoughts about the Twin system in general? Like strong, weak, middling, any particular like player demographics that you think are strong or interesting? Like what's your take on kind of the health of the farm system right now?
Well, I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on this, because I think you guys have a little bit more awareness around the rest of the league. I'm very Twin centric. I don't pay a lot of attention to other teams, but I kind of have a vibe on the system, and based on previous years where the Twins have at, I would guess that they're pretty middling overall. Not a top end system, but not a bottom end system either. I think a lot of Twins fans might be like, what do you mean? We got Walker Jenkins, we got Brooks Lee, we got Emmanuel Rodriguez. It's kind of like, yeah, but a lot of teams have a big three. That's that exciting. A lot of teams have three guys as top 100 prospects or whatever. Once you get past that big three, I think it's kind of interesting, because I think like their 4 through 10 is probably not as impressive as a lot of other teams. But then I think like their 11 through like 40 is better than most teams, I would guess. I think, in my opinion, this is a really deep system, to where maybe there's not a lot of superstars. Maybe there's not a lot of guys that you're going to be able to put into a position and have them be a major league starter for like 5 years. But there's a ton of guys that are going to reach the major leagues. There's a ton of guys that are going to be, maybe they only end up being role players or bullpen guys or whatever. But I think there's a ton of major leaguers in the system. I think we've kind of seen that a bit. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the guys are playing for other teams right now. A lot of the guys they've traded away. But as long as your major league team's having success, that's not too big of a pain point. You only have so many positions. You only have so many roster spots. Eventually, you kind of have to trade guys. But yeah, I think it's sort of a depth over sort of a quantity over quality in terms of the system. And then another thing, I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on that. But another thing I'm interested in is I kind of feel like, this is outside looking in, but I kind of feel like there's been a trend that they're sort of focusing more on baseball skills than really physical ability. They're not really grabbing the freak athlete guys and then trying to teach them how to play baseball. They're grabbing baseball players and then trying to teach them how to throw harder, or give them a sweeper, or get their bat speed higher and get their exit velo up. I'm not sure if that's just happens to be the kind of guys that they've gravitated towards or ended up with, or if that's an organizational philosophy or not. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Jeremy, so why don't we start with like takes on the system first? Like what do you think about Tom's thoughts there? Like middling system, like top heavy with a lot of depth. Like what do you think of that? Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think the hard part always is kind of balancing the prospect rankings, or how strong your prospect is, with what you have like pre-arb guys on your major league team, right? Because if you look at the Reds, for example, they have a really good system, and they also have a team full of younger talent. And so if you're a team like the Orioles, for example, who bring your guys up quicker, like your prospect status is going to be lower, but they're having Major League Baseball success, right? I mean, by and large, maybe the most impressive team in the American League over the whole stretch of the season. And they did it with younger dudes. And so that's what makes it harder, because Royce Lewis, really not a prospect, but is a prospect because he played very little minor league baseball. So he's still developing, right? Mm-hmm. Julian was one of those weird cases where he didn't really speak the language. He goes to Auburn. He looks like trash. I mean, I was excited when I was watching him in the College World Series, and then he airmails the play, and I'm like, that's not how you want to end your career. and all of a sudden he's doing it in the World Baseball Classic. So it's like you take those guys out, you take Matt Wallner out. And so, yeah, I think their minor league prospects aren't overly exciting, but they just need to find a handful of guys to complement what's already in place, because they're not an old team. And so that's where it's kind of hard, because if you've got nothing, right, if you're the Oakland A's or the Las Vegas A's or whatever they call themselves, you need to have prospects, because you just don't have those guys to support. So I think the minor league system, not great, but the overall organizational talent is maybe one of the most fun it's ever been for the Twins.
Yeah. That is a really fun way of looking at it, I think, of like organizational young talent as opposed to just prospects. And like, I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, about 11 through 40, because we talk about the Brewers and Cubs systems quite a bit too. And it just so happens that both of them have like top 5 systems where their 1 through like 12s are incredible. And I think it can tend to like skew our view of the Twin system as like weak by comparison. I think I tend to agree with your assessment of like drafting baseball skills as opposed to traits, with the exception, I think, of 2023. Because if you look at their first handful of picks, 2023, Walker Jenkins fell into their lap. Incredible high upside athlete, just like massive bat speed, just like a build your own outfield prospect. Charlie Soto throws upper 90s fastball, like a lot of just like it's like velocity. And then Brandon Winokur is like 6'6",
shortstop.
Insane shortstop, center field athlete extraordinaire, just like swatting balls a million feet. So I do kind of agree. I guess like with the exception of 2023 a little bit, where they got much more into the like toolsy high school prospects, which I think are kind of more fun.
But don't you think some of that is looking at your organization and trying to supplement what's already there? And obviously it's got to be available to you, but the prep pitcher, the Winokurs, the Rayas, the Sotos, like that's not necessarily something that's common. But I think as an organization, it's like if there's a guy that we really like that maybe has the higher ceiling with a terrible floor, which they've done with hitters too. Yeah. Like you want to balance some of the solid college guys with these high variable guys. And that's ultimately what you're getting when you get a high school guy, maybe less so with Walker Jenkins, because I think the floor is also pretty high. But the days of drafting like Joe Benson, where it's like, oh yeah, 5-star athlete, 1-star baseball player, like
Keone Cavaco.
Yeah. But I mean, his thing was he was kind of a pop-up guy.
Yeah. Right? Dude, yeah.
And I think the analytics that they had on him, the data, right? I mean, that's when we say analytics, we're talking about having just numbers, data. It was probably not a lot. So what they had looked good, but it wasn't the full story. And I think that's where you can find these athletes that also have, because you said we're looking at exit velocity, right? We're looking at traits that we can improve. That wasn't really readily available to everybody at every level a handful of years ago. It's like I remember looking at stuff on Perfect Game, and it's like, wow, they're measuring exit velocity of 10-year-olds. right?
That's legit. Yeah.
My daughter at a softball tournament, they had exit velo, like a station. You ran a whatever yard dash. You stood there and you hit with a gun behind you, and then you threw with the gun in front. Like, you went through these stations, and it all went into a computer, and then it all got sold to colleges. Right? I mean, that's kind of how this is developed. And so I think it's very specific what they're looking for. And the Twins look for their very specific thing in their very specific system. And that's not necessarily the case with every organization. And that's what's kind of made this fun. But that's what I think gives such a variable on organizational talent, because you're all trying to develop it in a similar way, but you have all these different starting points for all your guys.
Yeah, they've often taken guys who looked like reach, and again, I'm not any kind of a draft expert, but they've also taken guys like, especially in the second and third round, that weren't expected to be at the second or third, like
Ryan Jeffers,
like Spencer Steer. They've had crazy success. It's like, wow, how come everybody else missed on this guy? So yeah, they seem to know what they can work with really well. And they've identified those well. I think they've done a good job drafting, especially in recent years.
Yeah, since Sean Johnson took over, it's been remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you talked, Tom, or you alluded to the number of guys that sadly aren't in the system anymore. I mean, if you had like your Povich, CES,
even like Sawyer Gibson
Steer,
Long.
yeah, dude. He was always a favorite of yours.
Yennier Cano. But the thing is, though, and a lot of people look back on that trade deadline and think it was such a disaster, and I loved that trade deadline at the time, and I try to not change my opinions too much, because it's like in the moment you make those decisions and you got to live with them. And I don't think you could find a bigger Christian Encarnacion Strand super freak than me. Watching him play every day that season up to that point was a treasure. Just watching this guy murder minor league pitching day in and day out was so much fun. But none of those guys is going to be like a super duper star, I don't think, or at a premium position.
Right.
And I think the Twins that's when I look at this system and talking about how it's really good through 40. I think they can keep pushing guys like that out. Maybe not guys that are, 3-4 hitters, or again, not superstars, but if you just need players and pieces in depth, and the way Rocco likes to use guys and mix and match positions and all that, I think they can continue to do that and continue to build back into the rotation starters like Bailey Ober and Louis Varland and bullpen guys like they have. So I think they just have a really nice pipeline. It might not be, your all-star, future Hall of Fame type guys, but I think they have a ton of major leaguers coming up through the system still.
Couldn't agree more, man. All right, so I guess let's start to dig in on some guys, because we want to get Tom's takes on some specific guys, and I guess we'll start like at the top of the system. It's like fitting that today is the day we're recording, because BA released an updated Twins top 10 today. Top of that was probably unsurprisingly Walker Jenkins. Curious for your first impressions of him, having got to see him a little bit at the tail end of last season after the lengthy time it took to sign. Were you surprised he didn't shoot up to Cedar Rapids at the end of last season? And what were your kind of initial thoughts on him?
I wasn't surprised that he moved up, but maybe that says, this is still an 18-year-old human being. And I know other organizations are a lot more aggressive with guys sometimes. And he played really well. I think was he recovering from the hamate still, or had that been long gone?
I think it was decently behind him at that point.
And it's so much more of a controlled environment in Fort Myers with the complex there. And it's, maybe an easier transition. He's been preparing for this forever. So it's not like this is his first time away from home, or he's some, child. This is a man child, who's been, expecting to be a big time professional baseball prospect for probably many. He was the 10-year-old getting measured at the showcase.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that was a nice nice way to get him successful, and build him some momentum. I mean, I don't even know what to say about the guy. I think the sky's the limit. I've been head over heels about him since they drafted him. I know there was some debate by some people whether or not he was number one or Lee at the time of the draft. I was like, no way. Jenkins is way better of a prospect than Brooke Lee, I think. Mm-hmm. I think this guy's going to be in the conversation for the number one prospect in all of baseball in like a year. Now, part of that is because a lot of the guys ahead of him right now are going to graduate. Because a lot of those guys that got drafted in front of them, the college guys, I think are just going to rocket through their systems as long as they stay healthy. But I mean, yeah, you guys talk about the Brewers. Like a year from now, are we going to be talking about the Twins potentially giving a Jackson Chourio-like extension to this guy? I think that's possible. He has to, everything has to go well. He has to stay healthy. He has to keep playing well. But I think they're going to be, potentially aggressive with him if things go well. And
1 year from now.
Yeah.
But
you have a thought, Jeremy. Share it.
My thought was, should I write that down?
There's also the other end of the spectrum where, he gets hurt, can't get it going, maybe doesn't even get out of Cedar Rapids this year. The journeys that these guys go on, anything's on the table.
Yeah.
But I think he is like, again, I think he has the potential to be a number one prospect in all of baseball.
Do you foresee him staying in center field?
I do. He's already pretty big. He's already pretty big dude, but from what I've seen on some of like his times, he's got a lot of speed. That stuff starts to go a little bit, even at 18, 19, 20. So, that's in how big he's going to get. That's going to be a question. Now, if he stays in center field, it's not going to be like, Gold Glove caliber. It's going to be, he's
Cody Bellinger.
Workable. Yeah, he's workable there, but yeah.
I'd prefer him in the corner. Like let the bat play, put him in the corner. Don't have him worry about being a center fielder. Don't have him worry about if he loses a step. Have him get, bigger, stronger, and put him in the 3-hole and be a right fielder. And
he's certainly going to hit enough to be wherever you want to put him out there. Sure. So,
I mean, how much bigger and stronger do you want him to get, though, Jeremy? He's already 220 pounds as an 18-year-old.
He is put together, man.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, if you just, as a center fielder, you have to be able to withstand things a little bit differently than as a right fielder, right? Sure. And that's not to say that Max Kepler looks like a corner outfielder, not a center fielder. And it's not to say that the Twins have the prototypical Willie Castro left fielder either. So, I mean, it's just, to me, it's like if you're going to develop a center fielder, you want that guy to be able to cover ground, especially in target field. Left center's huge. Mm-hmm. And if you can just put him in right center field or in right field, where they thought they could put Miguel Sano, for crying out loud, that you could maybe just let the bat thing happen, and he could maybe get moving a little bit faster, right?
That's true.
And I don't know if the bat plays. I don't want to have to worry about his development as an outfielder. I don't know if that's a realistic thing to worry about, right? I don't think he's a poor center fielder, but I just think that's a much harder ask of a guy that you're moving quickly.
The last thing I'll say on that is I think there's, importantly, one guy who's really bullish on Walker Jenkins being a center fielder, and that's Walker Jenkins. And he's pretty determined to show that he is a legit defensive center fielder. The arm is not in question, I think. And so my perspective is like, what is the harm, right? Early in his minor league career, see how it goes in center, let him play there where he wants to play and perform, because if you're putting your top prospect in the environment in which they feel most comfortable, I think there's a good argument to be made that that's what sets them up for the most success and the best performance, at least as he's still working through the lower levels of the minor leagues.
Yeah, that's why Brandon Whitaker's playing shortstop
and center field.
Right. I mean,
I have a question for you guys. Do you feel like, and this is definitely your realm more than mine, but there's a lot made about how deep this draft class was. Maybe not in most years, but in some years, do you think Walker Jenkins might have gone 1-1?
Definitely.
Yeah.
This year being one of them, 2024 being one of them, I think. I think any of the top 5 from last year would go 1-1 in 2024 comfortably.
Yeah, I think Wyatt Langford is totally, not totally forgotten, but for the most part, relatively unheralded for being as freaky good as he was.
Already cleaning up a double-A.
Right. And so he's far away the number 1 pick in 2024 if that were to be an option. And it's like he's not even talked about because of everybody else. And that's just absurd to me.
Yeah.
Yep. Crazy class for sure. Crazy prep class. I think we can all agree the Twins are lucky to have Jenkins in the organization. Cannot wait to see what he does in 2024. Okay, let's move on to Brooks Lee because Tom, you brought up feel like Jenkins is clearly a superior prospect to Lee from the jump. So here's my question for you, man, because I feel like we've now seen a good run of Brooks Lee, who tends to start slowly at a level and then kind of slowly heat up and then just start to scorch it and move on to the next one. Is he the most likely high caliber Twins prospect to be traded this offseason? And if he's not, and he stays with the organization, what do you see as his best position defensive fit in the infield?
I mean, I guess the way you worded the question, I'd have to say, yeah, he would be. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. I think that's because a lot of teams would love to have Brooks Lee. I think a lot of teams would look at him as a trade target because he has such a high floor. Mm-hmm. If you are a GM trying to make a trade and you want it to work out, you want to look good, and oh, by the way, a guy who's in AAA. That's a really good name that's going to come across. And, I think he can play shortstop. I think he's probably much better fit at third base. And I think he could be a really good third baseman. Second base would be on the table too. So yeah, I think teams are going to ask about him. I don't know if we want to get off on this tangent, but I think teams are probably going to ask a lot about Edouard Julien too. But the Twins haven't really dealt. We talked about all the guys that the Twins have dealt. They haven't really dealt from the top of the system other than Chase Petty. But he was not even in the system yet.
Right.
Almost. I have to go back to Matt Garza, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He had debuted, or Wilson Ramos. I mean, those are the two that stick out to me. But other than that, it's all these big names and they don't move them. And I love it. But prospects are cool.
Yeah, and so I think the conversation naturally goes to the MLB infield situation, like you said, and I think the obvious option out there is to trade Polanco
for sure.
And I think that's probably the things that's going to get the most steam. But again, I will not fall out of my chair if Edouard Julien is not on this team on opening day, and it's not anything against him. I love him, but I think teams are going to ask about him a ton. Because the Twins are going to call teams, hey, you want Jorge Polanco? They're going to say, well, what about that guy?
Yeah.
Right.
And we know Derek Falvey. He's going to have that conversation. He's not going to say no. And if somebody's going to have to give up a ton, it would take a ton. I think the Twins like him a lot. But he has some. I know we're talking about Brooks Lee, but
Brooks Lee is what makes this conversation a possibility.
Exactly.
Right? Because Jorge Polanco and Edouard Julien and Brooks Lee could all fill second base, right? If Royce Lewis is filling third and Carlos Correa is filling second and Alex Kirilloff is filling first, you have 3 legitimate big league options at second base. And I'd trade any of them for the right pitcher.
Yep.
Okay, so then let me ask this question then, just to rubber stamp it. And Tom, we are always down for tangents no matter what. Rank Polanco, Julien, and Lee in order from most likely to least likely to be traded this offseason.
I would put it Polanco most likely, Lee second most likely, Julien least likely. But I just think other teams are going to look at Julien and ask about him a ton. And tangent wise, he's maybe a great example to call out too of, when I said earlier about how there's not a lot of guys you would project to have, hold down a spot in the major leagues for 5 years, be an all-star. And, Edouard Julien wasn't a guy that not that long ago I would have said, oh yeah, that's a guy who's going to be a major leaguer for, have a nice career, maybe potentially even be an all-star caliber player. And he's doing it now from what we've seen. So you never know who's going to elevate themselves as they kind of move up the rank. But Brooks Lee, yeah, I do think the Twins would be open to moving him too, because again, there's that great infield depth. As far as how the pieces work, Correa is not going anywhere, and if you ask me who is the best fit at third base, I'm not sure I would say Royce Lewis out of that group, but almost kind of similar to the Walker Jenkins conversation we were just having. Royce Lee's at third base. He's already there. You have him there. He's perfectly fine there. I think he's good defensively there. Just leave him there and work everything else around him. Even if you think Brooks Lee would be a better defensive third baseman, which I think maybe that there's a conversation to be had there, I still would just have whoever comes up next, you're going at second base, because that is Royce Lewis's spot. We're keeping him there. We're not going to have him run into walls or moving around the diamond too. We move everybody else around the diamond, but this guy is going to stay at third base.
I love Royce Lewis in center field.
I do too, man. I think that as a prospect, I thought that's where his best future home was going to be. But he's just had so much go on that I'm just like, give me Royce Lewis healthy. Just keep him doing this.
And he, in my opinion, and maybe it's just my eyes, but he's filled out, right? He looks more like a corner player now than an up the middle player.
He does.
He's super athletic, but he does have 2 repaired ACLs.
Yep.
And so a year ago, or I don't know when it was, 8 months ago, thinking he was a long-term center fielder, I was pretty sold on that. Being a third baseman now, I think just makes sense. And I'm okay with that, especially with Miranda kind of falling off the face of the planet. So yeah, I'm with you there.
But Brooks Lee, I still like him a lot. I've never thought about moving him down, below Emmanuel Rodriguez, who I like. So I do like Brooks Lee. I don't want to kind of drag him through, but yeah, and I think he's going to have a long, successful MLB career, but is he going to be an all-star type guy? I'm not really sure.
Yep.
It's hard for me to look at this guy and try to figure out what's going on. Cause I'll be the first to admit I watch a lot of these guys, I look at the numbers a lot. I don't consider myself like a great scouting eye or anything. But when I watch Brooks Lee, he reminds me so much of Hunter Pence in his weirdness of how he looks. Not in anything else about his game, but just everything looks kind of awkward about him. His swings are kind of awkward looking. The way he throws sometimes is kind of unnatural. He makes some of the most difficult plays. Like his range isn't great, but if he gets to a ball, he is going to make the out because he can dive and make crazy off balance throws from his back, flying all over the place. Does a lot of stuff awkward, but does it well still. So I'm not sure. I don't know what to do with that. Because when I look at him, I don't see a guy who, is a top 50 prospect in baseball based on some of his actions out there. He's performed really well. I'm a little weirded out at how bad he was against left-handed pitching this past year. He has 603 OPS. He's a switch hitter against lefties. He did not perform very well. I don't know what to make of that either. So it's like I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of this guy. But I also think if you're the Twins, if you're Derek Falvey, and you're in this situation where your hands are kind of tied with the payroll, you kind of have to figure, and your window is wide open at the major league level. You kind of have to figure out, well, how do we keep this going? And, trading Brooks Lee might be what has to be what happens. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel like the production comp that we've talked about on here for Lee maybe is weirdly like Jorge Polanco, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a 2 to 3 win guy most seasons. Occasionally he'll have a great season like that. What was it? 2019 where Polanco was an all-star and he had a 4.5 win season. He'll pull one of those out, but most of the time it's just a solid above average regular.
That actually works defensively too. Cause it's could he play shortstop? Yeah. You could have him play shortstop in the major league level, but you're probably always going to have somebody better than him at shortstop. And then it's kind of where does he go from there? I like that.
Guest appearance. Guest appearance from Jeremy's dog, who agrees with my comp on Brooks Lee for Jorge Polanco.
I do want to say one thing, because to add to that, kind of the intangible part too, where Jorge Polanco not in the lineup, it was like, okay, we could use Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco comes back in the lineup, isn't like killing it, but the whole lineup seems to get better with his presence. And Brooks Lee's kind of got that same type of thing too. You're going to take good at bats. You're not going to make silly outs. You're not going to run it outs on the bases. Like just adding that type of thing makes sense to me. And could it be something as simple as Polanco's going to walk after this year if he's still on the roster? You could roster all three of them this year. In the event that Polanco leaves, and you look at these two guys and you say, okay, we want cost certainty. We're going to offer you a long-term deal. We're going to offer you a long-term deal. The guy that signs it first stays. The guy that doesn't is now on the chopping block.
Whoa, ruthless.
Is that fair though? I mean,
Polanco is a team option for next year too, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Kepler has one. Kepler's just locked in for this year. Polanco has this year. And then, team option for one more at $12 million, I want to say. I could have made that number up. It's either 10 or 12. Okay, so speaking of, I want to come back to this note that producer Theo, but in the chat, 'cause I think it's an interesting one. So he's kind of calling out like the Twins never move top prospects and cite like Oswaldo Arcia. Jeremy, I don't know, is a favorite of yours to talk about, as a guy who was like putting up great minor league numbers who did not get moved and kind of petered out for the Twins. So I can't wait, Tom, because you're going to be like the tiebreaker on this one, I feel like, for us. There is a raging and ongoing debate on the show about Emmanuel Rodriguez. Kind of a polarizing prospect here.
I don't know that he's as polarizing outside of the DTS universe, but
that's what we like to hear, because I think people are going to be on my side.
I've heard Jeremy talk about him, and that's kind of led me to go back and kind of think about his year some. And it's definitely, when I think about it, there are certain pitches and in certain counts even where it's been like, oh, he's gonna murder this pitch. And he swings right through it. It's like you got the count in your favor. This is not a very good pitcher. Probably know what's coming. He has great power, and he does swing through a lot of pitches in the zone that I would expect him to hammer. And without the scouting eye, I'm guessing there's some kind of a hole in his swing or some kind of a spot that you can pitch him to. And he's going to have to figure that out, obviously. So I think that's a completely valid thing to point out. My thing with Emmanuel Rodriguez,
the butt's coming.
I don't think there's a single prospect probably in all of baseball who will benefit more from moving to a level that has an automated strike zone. There are a lot of good umpires down in the lower levels of minor leagues, but there's a lot of really bad umpires in the lower levels of the minor leagues. And you could tell his frustration was building throughout the year, and he kept it pretty cool. But there was a game or maybe two games in the playoffs I thought he was on the verge of potentially getting ejected from, because he had enough. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what impact that has. Now, that obviously doesn't address the whole swinging through pitches in the zone problem, because that's not going to go anywhere. But I do think that frustration mounted some as the year went on. And to be fair too, if I think about like what I was thinking about him a year ago compared to now, I don't think he carried forward what he showed at Fort Myers as much as what he did in Cedar Rapids. Part of that is he got off to such a bad start, playing in crappy weather in Iowa and Wisconsin. People
were panicking in April.
Yeah, I was probably too. But yeah, I feel like, I think there's reason to believe he will rise to the occasion, and whatever challenges that are presented, he's going to identify and figure out. Because having that good of plate discipline as a building block, like, you don't have to worry about that. Because pitch recognition, well, that might be part of the problem. I don't know. I was going to say that's not a problem, but that might be part of the problem. But his strike zone judgment is incredible. I think his power is really good. Speaking of the playoffs, I think he had 2 or 3 home runs including a grand slam in the playoffs, in addition to the stats that you'll see if you look them up everywhere else. They don't include those. So yeah, I think there's legit, things to be aware of and that he needs to work on. But I've never thought of moving him down or anything. I don't, maybe that's how you feel too, Jeremy. That maybe says more about the system, I guess.
Right.
Too.
Yeah. And sometimes I see him, when I see him like in the 80 range globally, I'm like, yeah, okay. When I see him higher than that, I'm like, God, there's so many questions about this guy. Not that there's not questions about everybody that surrounds him. It's just I get Oswaldo Arcia vibes, and that scares me.
He takes some big cuts. I'm speaking of center field. I wouldn't really say I'm sold on him as a center fielder either. So, that's another kind of thing too, but
is he too passive, Tom, at the plate?
I really think I think he's right. I think he's right. And the umpires are often wrong. And that's why part of why his strikeout rate was so high. And then if you take that into account too, it's like, it's not always strike three that they're missing. But I don't know. Either they don't have it or I haven't seen it, but I don't think we have in the zone, out of the zone swing and miss rates for minor leaguers anywhere. I think
you got to be special to have that.
Yeah.
Jamie's got it. He's sitting on it. He won't tell us because he knows it.
Why? I would never deceive you like that.
So I think part of it is he has such good strike zone judgment. But there is an element. I would bet that his in the zone swing and miss rate is higher than we would feel comfortable with. That would not surprise me still.
I think his overall contact percentage last year, which is not in the zone or out the zone, right? It's just period, was like 68%, I want to say, which
that's
is
not good, right?
Yeah, it's definitely on the low side.
Doesn't sound good. Yeah.
It's similar to like Kalai Rosario, honestly, who has, I think, some of the same problems, and they match up fairly similarly in terms of skill sets, where like they both have the power, they both have some solid plate discipline, but the swing and miss piece is the big question.
And Rosario ain't showing up on anybody's top 100. Nor will he.
I think that's like a little bit of a you thing about how we think about the top 100, actually, right? So here's my two quick things on that. One, there was so many graduations from the top 100 in the last calendar year, like a ridiculous number. And then two, I guess the question becomes, what point on a top 100 list do you feel like is the cutoff for like truly top caliber major league prospects? Because for me, that cutoff is way before like 50. And Emmanuel Rodriguez is sitting at like 45, 47 on most lists. But you said, I could see him at 80, but higher than that is maybe a little too high. I kind of cluster after like 25 to 30 all the way through 100 as like much more interchangeable than guys 1 through 25.
Yeah, I think that the tiers definitely get wider. But I think we're also, and I mentioned this to Carlos Collazo when we had him on too, I think we are not far away from having the greatest prospects in the system ever, like the deepest prospect system that we've ever seen in the next couple of years. Even though this next draft's not great, when you bring in the younger Holidays draft class and you start 25. Bringing in, like, it's going to be so good. And that's when that number for you, maybe it's 50, is going to drop a little bit, right? This year, I think that number comes up. And that's why when Brooks Lee is ranked as high as he is, and there's questions about Brooks Lee, it's because of the diluted prospect roster. But part of that is I think teams are maybe pushing guys a little bit more. You have less spots. There's some incentive to bring guys up. And it's going to ebb and it's going to flow. And that's going to be completely normal every year. I just think there's more questions about Emmanuel Rodriguez right now that I have than maybe most people do. But I think a year from now, these answers might all be there because he's got to do it in AA. And either he's going to strike out a ton in AA and we're going to say, God, that guy strikes out way too much, or it's going to get better. And Tom's going to say, yeah, it's because of a better strike zone. And I just think right now the jury's out a little bit more for me than you guys. But there's a possibility where this doesn't go well. There's also a possibility he's an all-star. And I think that variable, right? It kind of does this, and right now it's really wide for me.
My God, you're going to be so smug if you're right. I sure hope you're wrong.
It's usually easier to bet against a guy. You know,
there you go.
If the other end is all-star, you're
Right.
probably usually going to be right if you pick the other end. But
right,
yeah, this year is massive for him, huge.
Agreed. Let's revisit in the 2024 version of this conversation. All right, let's move on to some more guys. We're gonna blast right past the hour mark, Tom. So you just got to tell us when you don't want to talk anymore, because we'll keep going. We got a few more guys to hit here, if that works.
Oh yeah.
I want to dig into a couple of pitchers who are kind of the upper echelon, I think. So I'm going to pair them together. Marco Raya and David Festa. Festa ended the year at AAA. Raya had an incredibly rough start in AA, pitching on this kind of 2 to 4 innings at a time plan, and then suddenly in September really seemed to put it together and turn the corner. Do you think either one of these guys can be an effective major league starter?
I think that's the hardest thing to figure out for me. I think that's the hardest thing to figure out is who of these guys can actually be a big league starter. I think they both have what it takes. With Raya, both of his breaking pitches are good, but I don't know that. I think one of them needs to elevate to being great. As a great second pitch. Festa has 3 quality MLB pitches, but I don't know that he can maintain velocity through 5-6 innings. That's my concern with him.
He's so slight still.
He is. He's a big dude, but he's real lanky, and I think that benefits him. But Raya, I think he was really frustrated. I saw one of his toward the end of his bad stretch. He had a particularly bad start in which he might have had the worst body language of anybody I've seen on a minor league baseball field. And he wasn't having a good. It wasn't like he was like mad at his teammates or mad at the umpire or anything. It was just I think he was having a rough go of it, and I don't think it's fun when you're trying to be a starting pitcher and they're only letting you go 3 innings. No matter his pitch count, no matter how good he was throwing, they weren't letting him go early on. He threw fewer innings, very slightly, but fewer innings last year than he did the year before. So I'm having a hard time of what to make of Marco Raya. Probably more for that reason than anything with his pitch usage. I think it's really curious that they put him at AA, given that they were limiting his innings. So this is a theory I have, is that like, remember Royce Lewis back in like 2019, he had his crazy weird swing with a weird leg kick that like went up and over. Yep. And they still put him in AA and they let him keep his swing. And I think they did that to be like, all right, now look, that didn't work. You got to change that. Here's the proof that it didn't work. You got to change it. So I almost wonder if there's something, and don't have a good enough eye to know what it would be, but I wonder if there's something with Marco Raya that they specifically wanted him to struggle some this year. And that's why they pushed him into AA as a 20-year-old. So he could struggle a little bit and they could be like, and I'm not saying like he resisted something and then they were like, oh, well, we'll put you in AA. I'm saying they wanted him to fail first. So when they brought him something, they could be like, hey, remember when you had this rough stretch? Here's something we want you to work on in the off season. I don't know. Maybe it's learn a sweeper. I don't know. Might be tweaks to his delivery. Could be a lot of different things, but I just found that very curious with him that they were so careful with him, but then kind of aggressively promoted him. Festa, I kind of like him because I think he's going to be a quality relief piece if starting doesn't work out. Again, I think all 3 of his pitches are MLB quality pitches. The dude is 6'6". He's big and lanky. He hides the ball incredibly well. But like I said, sometimes in the first inning, he's throwing 97, 98. And then by like the 3rd inning, it's like 93, 94. That's kind of like what happened there. And again, maybe he can add some weight and that'll help. But I've just found that curious with him.
Yeah, for sure with Festa. Doesn't he kind of feel like this year's Louis Varland? Like in that
he's the next guy.
Yeah, like he's.
I know he's not on the 40 man, but I don't think that's going to be a problem if it gets to him. If it gets turning to him.
Like, he's the next guy. His role is kind of uncertain. Varland in the same boat. Like, is he going to start? Is he going to be a reliever? Should make his debut at some point this year. Probably will shuttle back and forth between St. Paul and the majors a little bit, depending on how the rotation shakes out. I don't know. Jeremy, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, you say this year's version of Varland, but isn't it fair to throw Winder, Ober into that like mid not hot, super high draft picks, successful development stories? There's going to be more of those guys coming up the pipeline. The more of those types of guys that you develop, the better off your organization is, because you're going to have either starting pitching depth, or you're going to have guys that develop into really good relief pitchers, Griffin Jacks, right? Juwan Duran, but even before that, the Tyler Duffys of the world. Like, that is all really, really, that's all really, really good for the organization. So however Festa works out, it's a development win, because when David Festa was drafted, it wasn't like this guy's going to be a major leaguer.
Was it 13th round? Was that?
Yep.
God,
and Winder, Ober, like Varland, none of those guys were even guys like at the draft were like, that's gonna be the starter. The Twins just got their guy. And that's what's so good about how these drafts have been.
Well, even Marco Raya, he was the weird 2020 draft, but it was that 4th or 5th round.
Yep, 4th.
And that was another guy I kind of got the sense in watching from the outside looking in that other teams like was not on their radar. It seemed like Marco Raya.
And he's a little bit different, I think, because he's tiny for one.
That's another thing. That's another concern. Yeah, he's listed at 6'1", but man, I don't know if he's
probably 5'10". The shoulder thing was a high school guy. Like, there was just a lot of things working against him. But obviously, the Twins saw something where it was like ceiling super high in a different sort of way than Bailey Ober ceiling's high, because he's a giant.
10 feet
because he's touching the ceiling. But that's my problem with though. Okay, so I feel like you guys just illustrated the point so well. Like the like Falvey has come to Minnesota to develop a pitching pipeline, and people are grumpy about this all the time because they think there should be 5 aces that are homegrown in the Twins rotation. But at times last year, the Twins rotation was 40% in Varland and Ober, guys that the Twins drafted and developed after the 10th round. Like, that's I like it. Just like feel like we need to like define what like success looks like. That is successful. Look at the guys in the bullpen. How many of them are homegrown? The Twins at least have had a hand in the development of Jackson, Duran, and XYZ ABC. And so I just feel like people need to check their expectations with that. And I think you're right, Tom. Like the pitching depth is nutty. And I think if we have this conversation, or when we have this conversation this time next year, I'm sure there'll be names that we haven't even talked about yet that we're excited about, that are kind of coming down the road, so to speak, in terms of pitching depth.
Yeah, and we've talked about those guys, right? The Pearson Holes, the whole Cedar Rapids rotation. Like 10, 15 years ago, it was Nick Blackburn. Like, he was the number 1 prospect. And now it's like there's all sorts of pitching depth. And they're not all gonna turn. But the Twins have done a great job in developing these guys. And if one of them turns into a Cy Young type, then the whole narrative changes.
Yep.
And that's what's exciting.
I think it's really fun too that, and I struggle with this, and I've moved off of certain. Who's the top guy? Who's the top starting pitching prospect? I might have one guy. You might have one guy. You might have one guy. Like, you look at each of these kind of the prospect lists, it's like, oh, this publication really loves CJ Culpepper. Oh, these guys really love Corey Lewis. And it's like, and that's the thing about like that concept of all the way through 40 is like somebody's 28th prospect on their list might be the number 9 prospect on another list. And it's not really because those two publications think that dramatically differently. It is because there's not that big of a gap between a guy who's at like 11, 12 and a guy who's barely in the top 30, I think. The Twins just have a ton of these guys that have been performing and looking good. If they can work their magic, like you said, not all of them are going to pan out, of course, but they have tons of opportunity with these guys.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what you value, right? Do you value the closer to the major guy? Do you Do you view the guy that's got the lowest risk? Do you view the guy that has the highest ceiling? Because I think those are all, and we might differ on those opinions if we had to say this guy fits this category, this guy fits this category. 3 different categories, we might come up with 9 different guys.
Yep.
And 5 years ago, it would have been like, oh, Jose Barrios, Jose Barrios, and Jose Barrios. And there isn't that guy, but Barrios struggled. I mean, he had his issues too in the minors, and you just, the guys that you talked about kind of fit each one of those categories, and that's why it's really unclear who is number one, because I don't think we would agree with each other, or we might not agree with ourselves tomorrow.
Yeah.
If we had an opinion, and that's okay.
Right now, I'm talking myself into Festa because of that fallback. That I do think he more than probably the other guys would be a really great reliever. And I mean, that's something to keep in mind too when we're just talking about the Twins, like, and we're talking about the bullpen being built. If Matt Cantorino stays healthy and is in the bullpen, that is a difference-making potential arm. They're going to be able to put Festa back there potentially at some point if they feel like it, and it works out with starting pitching depth. So it's not like we're even talking about like potential solutions that are like those Cedar Rapids guys where it's like, well, they're not going to factor in this year. They have a bunch of guys that could be in Pearson Olin being in Double A and pitching so well. You know, he's maybe getting into the conversation at some point if he keeps up what he's done.
Yeah, man, I love that Cantorino call out because I feel like he is just an absolutely forgotten man. But like, I feel like, you know, the stuff and the arm is absolutely legit. So hope he has a speedy recovery. We get to see him. Jeremy, you brought up you called it the entire Cedar Rapids rotation. So Tom, I got to ask you about this, man. An incredible group from the kind of mid rounds of the 2022 draft with like Andrew Morris, CJ Culpepper,
Zebby
Matthews. That's like literally 5 guys who kind of started together, had incredible success at Fort Myers, moved up to Cedar Rapids together, and continued strong performances pretty much across the board. Do you have kind of a favorite of that group, a guy you really like to watch who's kind of caught your attention in that cluster of like 5 or 6 guys?
You know, Lewis is undeniably fun. The knuckleball is sort of the thing that jumps out, but he's not a knuckleballer. Mm-hmm. That's never like how often do you see a guy who, I throw a knuckleball, but who has good enough feel for that pitch to have it not be like, this is my pitch, you know? You don't see that. And then he throws it like 85 miles per hour. I've never seen a knuckleball thrown as hard as he throws a knuckleball. That's insane to me. And then to have it just be like, it's just, I got that on the side. But his velo is not as impressive as the rest of that group. Usually sits around 91. And, if the Twins have shown anything, it's they can get those guys up. So we'll see what happens if he can accomplish that. That's a game changer. Some places have really pushed him up. I haven't done that quite yet because I want to see that velo gain.
Yep.
Now CJ Culpepper and Andrew Morris are throwing like 95, 96. They're already there. And Zebby Matthews, I don't think is too far off. And his command is amazing. Like him and Pearson Ole were like 2 of the best strikeout minus walk percentage or strikeout to walk ratio pitchers in all of minor league baseball last year. Just incredible. My thing is, though, just like put Morris in there. Put Morris in that conversation.
Yeah, he's overlooked, man.
I hear a lot of Lewis, Culpepper, and Matthews. And then I'm always like waiting. Like on the edge of my seat. Like, are they going to mention my guy? And they don't. And it's like Andrew Morris was the highest drafted out of those guys. Yep. He was drafted in the 4th round. And it wasn't like he was a bonus saving. He got $500,000. It was just twice as much as any of those guys got. Throws 96. His slider is like a 90-mile-per-hour slider. He had the 2nd best ERA in the system last year. So it's like the strikeouts weren't crazy, and he's not really considered as projectable, especially as CJ Culpepper. I think you can kind of see it in their deliveries. Culpepper has some more athleticism, and he throws like 7 pitches. It's insane. But this is just a ridiculously fun conversation to have about a bunch of guys that were drafted after Connor Prelip, oh, by the way, who has like the craziest spin slider. ever. Like some of those numbers from the draft combine on his slider, I couldn't even believe them.
Insane.
So yeah, everybody has their favorites. I just want Morris to make sure he's in the conversation, and I want to talk about them all day, every day, because how fun is it that all these late drafted arms are proving to be interesting guys.
It's the best.
It's the best.
It is the best, and I feel like this 2024 season has to be where we start to see some separation between them, right? And they've literally moved as an entire staff together for a pro season and a half, which is it's crazy that it's so uncommon. I think that they were all kind of so dominant in the first year and a half. Kyle
Jones is in there too. I think he was like the 7th round pick, and he actually was the first guy in Cedar Rapids.
That's right.
He didn't have as impressive of a year, but again, I mean, this organization has had a lot of success adding velo. I wouldn't be shocked if, in mid-season we're like, look, check out this Kyle Jones guy. Because like Pearson Ole added like 6 miles per hour on his fastball in 1 year. So like when you have a setup where you're identifying guys that you might be able to do that with, and then you are starting to get a track record of like, I remember Bailey Ober throwing like 88 miles per hour when he was in Fort Myers or whatever. It's just ridiculous. And Louis Varland too, throwing 100 in the postseason.
So do you think that there'll be any telling signs when initial rosters come out?
As far as like who separated themselves among that group?
Yeah, because I mean, Raya is going to be in AA. I think that's a given, right? Pearson Ole is probably going to be in AA. So you can't take that. You can't take all those guys, right? Some of those guys are going to have to stay back in high A, and I just think that that's going to tell us a little bit of something about how things are going.
And
plus, I'm really curious about Tanner Hall, because if he develops a little bit more in his fastball, all of a sudden he's going to be in this mix.
His changeup is ridiculous, man.
Yeah,
that's going to be fun. And he was kind of the only early-ish 2023 college pitcher that fits in with that group. That to me is going to be something to watch.
Yeah, the one thing I forgot to mention about Morris too is that he's younger than the other guys, except for Culpepper. Right. He's a little bit older. He's like a month older than Culpepper or whatever. Morris was the last guy to get to Cedar Rapids, so I think maybe that probably plays into why he's sort of the forgotten guy, I guess. It wasn't like it wasn't like months, but he was the last.
He started injured after being drafted a little bit, didn't he? Or maybe I'm mistaken.
So. Yeah, I think he got off to a little bit of a slower start. So I would, if anybody stays back, maybe it will be Morris. I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, probably that conversation will take care of itself. So I'm guessing someone probably among that group will get injured, unfortunately. But like even Ben Etheridge, who is kind of intriguing. He stayed in Fort Myers all year, but then he was in the Arizona Fall League. I think he got crushed there. But there's just so many arms from that draft class. It's ridiculous.
Super, super fun. Okay, I got to ask you about one more guy. One more guy who I know that you're a fan of, who's been kind of subject to like plenty of, I think, major league speculation this offseason just because of a lack of Twins moves to date, right? And he's a guy we've talked about too. Jeremy, you brought up like taking into account guys who were on the verge of the big leagues or in the big leagues and already contributing in your talent pool. Austin Martin is in a really interesting position, plenty of injury issues, really solid on-base numbers at AAA. What is your take on what his role looks like with the Twins in 2024? Do you think he is a major league contributor?
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be tricky though, because he has a lot of, adjacent traits to a Willie Castro and a Nick Gordon in the positions they're going to fill and what they can do. Maybe not all these guys will be in the organization come opening day. We'll have to wait and see. But it's just hilarious. I've gone from the low man on Austin Martin to the high man on Austin Martin after this time. I think everybody just got so sour on him when he wasn't what they thought he was going to be. And I don't think he's getting enough credit for what he has done more recently.
Mm-hmm.
You look at this guy's background too, like, having his final college season end due to COVID, being a high draft pick, going straight to AA, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to play you at shortstop and center field. He didn't really play shortstop before he got drafted. He didn't really play shortstop at Vandy. That was all, I think, things that did not help that Toronto did. Now the Twins, when they traded for him, of course they weren't going to send him down, so he stayed in AA. I do think they tried to make shortstop work for way too long. Very clear he was not going to be a shortstop. Actually, very clear he was uncomfortable playing shortstop, in my opinion. So I think there were some things that, if you want to be a Major League Baseball player, you got to overcome adversity. You got to deal with that stuff. So I'm not trying to give him a complete free pass. You can kind of look at how that worked out and see where maybe he wasn't put in the best situation to succeed. I think it's surprising how little power he's hit, considering what he did in college. But 2022 Arizona Fall League, he had a 936 OPS. Now that's a crazy hitter league. Edward Julian had like a 1200 OPS or something there. But he was really good. That was the first time he'd been really good in pro ball. Unfortunately, he gets his elbow injury, and that kind of ruins his year this year. But after a very bad 16 games in AAA to start out, from there on, in 43 games, it was 185 plate appearances, roughly a little under 2 months, 297 average, 427 on base percentage, 473 slugging. That's a 900 OPS, 14 stolen bases, 6 home runs, 29 walks against 30 strikeouts, almost as many walks as strikeouts in AAA. That is a 600 plate appearance pace of 45 stolen bases, 19 home runs, and 94 walks. So to me, we're seeing some flashes of what people were hoping this guy might look like in AAA. Now, it was only 43 games. It was only 185 plate appearances. And there's varying opinion on him. But when I see MLB Pipeline have him ranked 20th in the Twins system, it's
absurd.
No way. This guy was once considered a top 20 prospect in all of baseball, and he's not that guy. I get that. He's never going to be that guy. But I think there's so much more there still. And again, I feel like I've gone from the low guy on him because I was so pessimistic about him being a shortstop to the high guy. This guy's, and I think he might be like just what the doctor ordered for the Twins. Contact guy who also is tremendous strike zone discipline. One of the most confident base stealers I've ever seen. He has like an 85% success rate at base stealing. Really seems to have a feel for what pitches to go on. So he really brings a lot of things to the table that the Twins don't have a lot of. The only thing is, I think his best defensive position is second base. And obviously the Twins, they have 15 second basemen or whatever. I think his athletic ability lends itself well to center field, but he is undoubtedly not as comfortable there as I'd like him to be. So, and then there's the thing too, like if he's a guy like Max Kepler's talked about at times when he's attributed his turnaround to being more comfortable. Max has talked about like more comfortable in the clubhouse, better vibes. He plays better. Maybe Austin Martin's a little bit sensitive to that stuff, but that's going to be when you get called up and you're kind of up and down, you don't know if you're playing every day. You don't know what position you're playing every day. It's going to be a challenge if that is a thing with him, like I am kind of suspecting. So it's hard to know what to expect in terms of his impact to the Twins, but I very much think that he is someone to still be excited about.
I don't have a rebuttal for that. Jeremy, thoughts?
I've always been.
You're a big Austin Martin fan, right?
I was a huge Austin Martin fan. When the talk was Barrios to the Twins, I'm like, just get Austin Martin, it's a win. And then it was disappointing. I never knew where the right defensive placement was for him. Right, he was going to be fine in the batter's box, even if he isn't the guy that I think everyone hoped. That he was the best hitter in that draft. I mean, that was the talk, best hitter in the draft. His cards were going for all crazy amounts of money as a card guy. And then I'm like, yeah, I ain't gonna get those. I'm glad I didn't. but now the like fast forward to this offseason, it's like, oh, if Buxton can't play center, just throw Austin Martin out in center. I'm like, whoa. If this team is going to compete, they're not going to compete with Austin Martin as the starting center fielder. And that's not a knock on him. It's just that's not where he's going to fit. And I think when Tom said talent adjacent to the other guys on the roster, that's the nail and the head and the sound that it makes, because you have to get rid of Castro and you have to get rid of Gordon for Martin to make sense on the 26 man. You have to. And if he can be a AAA depth guy and do what he did over those 43 games, then yeah, there's a spot for him. I just don't see how he fits on a really good baseball team right now.
Yeah, it would have to be sort of a situation similar to Edouard Julien last year, to where you enter the season not expecting you need him at all. Really, plan A is we don't need this guy.
Right.
And then, somehow an injury happens or whatever, and he gets an opportunity. And if that goes well, maybe he continues to get opportunities. But I'm working on a project, and I like the way I put this in here. I put that Austin Martin should be more of an emergency option than someone who ranks third on the depth chart of a position you're going to need depth, which is the case with center field. Right. I do think, though, Buxton's going to play center. This would be a whole nother topic, whole nother podcast. I'm confident Buxton's going to play center. We know that it's not going to be a great deal. I think Willie Castro is not a completely horrible plan B, but I am obsessed with Willie Castro, so that will surprise no one. And then Austin Martin as a plan C. I mean, I can see a situation in which that's workable. But I think you make a good point, Jeremy. Like, if you are planning on being a contending team, you want to win the division, you want to get back to where you were, it feels wobbly. It feels more wobbly than you want to have with a team in this situation.
So you don't put Nick Gordon on there at all, huh?
I haven't seen him play center a ton. Yeah, I've seen Nick Gordon play a ton of left. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. I was surprised he got tendered, kind of. And that's with understanding that he hit really well in 2022. And he was like the primary left fielder for the Twins that year. But it seemed weird that with Celestino not really playing that well, and he was the primary center fielder, the guy who played the most there that year, that they didn't just put Gordon there and figure something else out and left. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. And there's plenty of time to make that all work out. And that's kind of
and hopefully it doesn't get that deep, but right. we know the deal.
Games in the center field and everything's solved.
That's right.
New
Pittsburgh Pirate Celestino, right? Isn't that where he went? Yep. I think. Okay, so you brought up Morris, Tom. I gotta hand you the mic. Because I
thought we were doing that this whole time. I'm sorry.
So I gotta tee you up for a question that I feel like is in your wheelhouse, right? I feel like one of the things I appreciate most about your content and the depth of coverage of the minor league stuff, right, is giving shine to prospects that we are not talking about enough, right? Morris is a guy you brought up who the numbers match up with everyone else. Why is no one talking about this guy? So my last question for you before we finish with a couple of quick listener ones is, are there a couple of guys that you can spotlight or want to speak on who are your kind of under the radar Twins prospects, guys who you feel like are performing really well and just not getting the shine they deserve, or have an interesting trait that more people should be paying attention to? Who are your kind of hidden gems of the farm system?
Yeah, Morris was one of the guys that I'd pulled out for this. And I looked at kind of where I have him on my most recent ranking, which it's not all that new. I got to update it. Mm-hmm. But so Andrew Morris, I was the 16th prospect in the system. MLB Pipeline has their most recent ranking, had him 30th, and Baseball America did not have him in their top 30. So Morris was one of them. He was the one pitcher. And then I have a couple of guys who catch. Whether we can call them catchers, I think remains to be seen a little bit fully. But Ricardo Olivar, who's the guy who had a 403 on base percentage for Fort Myers this past season, was the Florida Complex League MVP the season before that. So he's been a huge performer. A guy they signed for like $20,000 on the international market. It's just been a huge boost as kind of a guy they weren't expecting much of. I actually have Olivar as the 14th prospect in the system. Pipeline has him 21st, so they like him too. But Baseball America, that's another guy they don't have in their top 30. Mm-hmm. I kind of look at him and I kind of get like there's not a lot of like prospecty, fast twitch, projectable, but he's a good athlete for a catcher. He played a lot of left field. Some people have looked at his game logs and stuff and seen that he's made appearances at center field. I think
I'm one of those people.
He's not a center fielder. He's not going to do that. The primary center fielder was probably hurt, and then the other guy missed the team bus or something that day. Is my guess on it. Was one of those deals.
Crush my dreams.
But he plays a ton of left, and he doesn't look bad out there. And he was 12 for 13 in stolen base attempts last year too. So I mean, not that tells you of his sprint speed or anything, but that he has some athleticism beyond. I think what you would expect from your average catcher, and again knows how to get on base. A lot of the same things you could say about Andrew Cassetti, who's the other guy I pulled out, who also catches 426 on base percentage last year.
That'll work.
426. Yeah, he led the system. What was he was like in the top 25 among all of minor league baseball in OBP, which is like 1,000, whatever PAs I pulled it at. I have him 17th. He's not ranked on either MLB Pipeline or Baseball America's top 30. I think it's a similar story with him, to where it's not. I think he's about to turn 24, and he was in that draft class too with all those pitchers we're talking about. He's drafted in the 11th round. Hit for power. He had the second highest slugging percentage in the system behind Junior Severino as well. So he has the on base. He has the power. It is beating up on kids a little bit, for sure. I was really, really impressed with what I saw from him behind the plate, though, when he got to Cedar Rapids. That's sort of the tricky thing with Olivar, him being in Fort Myers. I haven't seen him catch a ton, so I can't speak to that much. But Cassetti, I think he's pretty good back there. I think he's got a good chance of sticking, and that's probably the primary factor why I have him up higher than you see anywhere else. And remember, this is a guy who caught Corey Lewis all year. This is a guy who caught all those guys. It helped all those guys get through this year. Obviously, the Twins split time at catcher, and nobody catches, the Lions share usually. So Noah Cardenas was catching them a lot in Cedar Rapids and Olivar and Fort Myers, but he got a lot of catching in of those guys. Did go to the AFL and struggled, but it was like 36 plate appearances or something.
Yeah, they really didn't give him a lot of playing time.
Yeah, I think he's like the third catcher, and Kevin Parada was their first catcher, and I think they kind of had to prioritize getting him reps. But he was still develop. You could still develop as a catcher. All them pitchers in the Arizona Fall League, they're still throwing side sessions, bullpens. So he's catching all these new guys that he's never caught before. So I'm sure that was still a developmental plus for him to go there. And we talked about Pearson Ole. I don't have a lot of stuff prepared on him, but Cassetti was the runner-up for Twins Daily Minor League Hitter of the Year, and Pearson Ole was runner-up for Minor League Pitcher of the Year. So two guys that were incredible performers. Now, that doesn't always translate to prospect status or, as you move up the chain, some things get exposed. So that could certainly happen with Cassetti, but I love the way he started his pro career.
Good stuff, man. Great picks.
So Cassetti, his numbers at Fort Myers were just bonkers, right? And it really, he came back down to earth at Cedar Rapids, right?
I want to say he still had a 900 OPS in Cedar Rapids, but yeah, not nearly as insane as what he did with Fort Myers. So yeah, that's why I kind of mentioned beating up on kids a little bit.
Right. Yep. For sure. But that's the same thing with all those pitchers, right? You come out of, not necessarily Power 5 schools, right? These are all non-Power 5 guys. But I think that's the hard part is you make that jump from low A to high, you continue to have success. Mm-hmm. Almost all of the guys we're talking about tonight, with the exception of Brooks Lee and Marco Raya, haven't really gone and done anything in Double A. And that's really kind of the separator
Yep.
for every prospect ever. And that's kind of exciting, but also kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, we saw that a little bit with Tanner Schobel last year.
Right.
Who definitely looked different in Double-A than he had before then. So I could see. I'm guessing that is what most other places are projecting out of possibly both Cassetti and Olivar, to be honest. But Cassetti hitting so much in the Florida State League, still that's such a pitcher league. That still jumped out to me. He slugged like 600 there, and then he did still have an 898 OPS with Cedar Rapids. So he still had over a 400 OBP, slugged about 500. But yeah, there was definitely a difference because I think his OPS with Fort Myers was over 1,000. So yeah.
But I think you spotlighted it, Tom. Like if he's able to stick a catcher, any kind of solid on-base skills are really, really going to play if he can play even like a backup catcher type role.
And if he's not a catcher, he's not a top 30 prospect in the system. I do put emphasis on catchers, shortstop, center fielders. They'll definitely move up my list if I think guys can stick at those positions. So that's probably explains too why both those guys I'm a little higher on. But
where do you have Danny Diadron? How do you say
Danny D'Andrade? I actually had him as one of the guys, and I thought he's already really on the radar.
How high do you have him?
7th.
Okay, love it.
And I think he's kind of like a Brooks Lee kind of, I think, to where I don't think he's ever going to have like an insane performance to where he's going to get into the top 5 conversation inside the Twins system. So he's like a budget Brooks Lee, I guess,
Okay,
Lee's obviously up there, but I think he's sort of like a guy who's very well-rounded, does a lot of things really well, but doesn't really have a screaming tool that really carries him. And he's another guy where I can't remember which was which, but I have him 7th. Somebody else has him 10th. So it's not like he is a well-known prospect, I feel like, in the system. But another publication had him like 21st.
Yeah, he's young, right?
He was 19 years old, spent all of last year in Fort Myers.
Yeah.
Shortstop, got big bonus guy. His numbers aren't tremendous, but when you factor in a 19-year-old in the Florida State League, then they kind of look a little bit better. Another guy with bad numbers who I actually talked about on a member-only video yesterday was Rafael Cruz, O'Neill Cruz's little brother, who played third base for Fort Myers. I think in that conversation of that I was saying, like the Twins like focus on baseball talent and they don't have a lot of like really physically talented guy. Rafael Cruz is a dude who's the opposite. Like he doesn't know what he's doing in the box, and his stats show it. But if you catch him on a good day and at the plate and in the field, like it's very exciting. If they can get him put together, and he was another 19-year-old with Florida State, or in the Florida State League. So maybe get kind of give him a free pass for having horrible numbers and striking out an ungodly amount, but probably not a guy who is going to make it, but somebody to keep an eye on if you get a chance to see him.
So Rafael Cruz, Brian Acuna, and Jose Salas. I mean, you're taking the really good big brothers, and the Twins are getting the.
Is Byron Churrillo is he not related to? I don't think he is.
No.
That would have been.
That would be wild, though.
Yeah.
That would have been a clean sweep.
Tom, I gotta ask you one listener question. But before we get you out of here, man, and I'm gonna adapt this one slightly, because we've already talked about David Festa a good amount. I want to ask you about another kind of forgotten man, I think, of the Twins upper minors, Simeon Woods Richardson. Has kind of fallen off the radar for folks a little bit, and Twins Daily's Cody Showman asked this question: Do you think Simeon Woods Richardson can contribute at the major league level? Who is likely to contribute more out of him and David Festa in 2024? So, what are your thoughts on Richardson, and if he can contribute in 2024? Because 2023 was not a great one for him.
Well, he's maybe the guy I need to revisit most because he had a very split season. I don't think a lot of people realize how well he ended the year. Over his last 14 starts, he had a 3.03 ERA. And that was with like a 1.2 whip, nothing too crazy. It was only like 7 Ks per 9. But, that's like a half season worth of starts with an ERA right around 3 in AAA. Certainly compared to how he started the year, which was horrible. I would love to look back and see what happened. In terms of who's more likely to contribute, I guess it's what role opens and what. I think Woods Richardson is more likely to get a look as a starting pitcher, but I would bet if one of them contributes a bunch, it's going to be David Festa out of the bullpen if they can get to the point where they are comfortable with that. But I think Woods Richardson is interesting too because this is a new thing too. I don't have a lot of information on, but some people are starting now that Baseball Savant data is available for especially the AAA level. Some people are starting to compile stuff plus metrics, and Simeon Woods Richardson was super high on some of those stuff plus metrics, which is kind of crazy. And in stuff plus, it's the whole arsenal, But I usually think of stuff still as like somebody who's got a wicked breaking ball and throws super hard, which he doesn't really, especially the velo. Simeon Woods Richardson sits like 90, 91. I'm not sure how that happened when they acquired him. The word was he was like 94, 95. I don't think we've really seen that since he's been in the Twin system. Can they get back to that? I don't know. If they can, he's exciting. If they can't, we still have this guy that pitched pretty well in AAA and has these crazy stuff plus metrics. Even though he throws like 90 with the fastball, his slider is like 86, 87. So I don't know if and then his changeup is like 84. He commands all of them, and he can move them around in the zone. So I don't know if there's something there that the Twins can work with. He also drops in a curveball every once in a while that gets lots of whiffs, basically because it's a complete change of pace because it's like 73. He throws his fastball up in the zone, so it kind of messes with guys. I can't say I expect much of Woods Richardson at this point. But again, if they can find, I don't know if that was just hot guns and BS, the 94, 95 back when he was a bigger prospect. And maybe this is an example, one of those guys that once he got to AA, what happened? I mean, maybe that's just who he is. But I think, if they can get him hanging out with Pablo Lopez and talking about pitch sequencing and, getting him with some of these major league guys and then find some extra velo there. He's super talented. He's got great control. He's really athletic and he's super young still. He's only 23 years old, I think. Incredibly young. To be this far along since he was drafted so young. But I don't know what to make of him.
So the weird thing with him too, and I was trying to fill in all the blanks, and you guys can probably help, and if not, I'm sure Theo can, but he was drafted by the Mets. He was traded to the Blue Jays. He was competing for, was it Canada in the World Baseball, but also competing, like he's just had this weird, so far his professional career it's been like interrupted by a lot of things, right? Trades, leaving spring training to go compete on a national or world stage.
Olympics, wasn't it? The Olympic team?
It was the Olympics.
With Joe Ryan, right?
Yeah. And then was he on the World Baseball Classic roster? Okay, it wasn't. Okay. Steele's saying no. But he came in and he made a spot, not a spot start, or was a start he made a start for the Twins in 2022. And then in April of 2023, on a really cold day, I was there, he pitched almost 5 innings of relief, was all over the place early, gave up a home run, and then kind of settled down, pitched, in my opinion, pretty well. They lost the game. He got sent down after that, and then was just bad for a while. And it's like, when your career is stops and starts and stops and starts and relocates, and you're, how old is he? 23 years old? Like, that's a lot for a dude to adjust for. And like you said, he hasn't been great after AA, but in 23 games, 22 starts in 2022, over 100 innings, his whip was just a little bit over 1 with almost 10 strikeouts per 9. And so I think there's something there. And he's got as good of a shot as any as being kind of this. Yeah, we wrote him off, and all of a sudden, because he's going to have for all we know, he should have a very normal offseason for maybe the first time in his adult life. And it takes just one kind of recalibration. And I feel like the Twins have been very, very good at doing that with pitchers. That I dropped him on my list. He's going to drop on every list. And maybe that's exactly what he needs, is to come into a situation where the expectations are very, very low and just be able to be that seventh starter and get the opportunity. And then who knows from there? Because he's young. I mean, how old is Joe Ryan right now?
27 says Theo.
Like, isn't Corey Lewis like 23? Like he's as old as some of these guys we're talking about in Cedar Rapids. It's crazy.
So I think there's hope, aside from the fact that eventually he'll run out of options and the Twins will have to make a decision. But there's still hope there, because he's an athletic dude and he's still learning how to pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the reason that you get traded twice when you're that young is because teams really like your stuff. And so I think there's hope there. I'm just not holding my breath, but I would love to see him have success.
And I'm going to really sound like I'm kicking more dirt at Toronto, but another thing that was a stop start, he was in pro ball by now. So unlike Austin Martin, who was in college, but he was in pro ball when COVID happened. And he was like, he was entering his age 19 season. That was a pretty big lost opportunity for him. Right. And then what did Toronto do coming out of COVID? They sent him as a 20-year-old straight to AA, just like Aston Martin. So I think that was just so aggressive of a send. And I think I almost wonder if Toronto knew they were going to trade those guys. They're like, let's just send them to AA so we can have these, in
the shop window.
Yeah, in the shop window. But I don't think that helped him either.
And when you say, why did the Twins promote Marco Raya? Well, you knew they were thinking about making moves at the deadline, and maybe right? I mean,
is that a prediction you're leaving us with?
No, last year before the deadline, he gets promoted to AA, and it's like, are they taking the reins off? If he all of a sudden throws 5 shutout innings, teams are going to be like, hey, we'll take this Raya guy. What do you want?
That's a good theory.
I mean, it's all kind of the same type of deal, and SWR there's still time, and I think that's the thing with pitching prospects, is it's not linear at all, and he's been faced with a lot of stuff. He's thrown 407 innings as a professional at age 23, so I think he's figuring stuff out. I hope that he does it with the Twins and not 2 years afterwards with somebody else like the Tigers.
Yeah, and I think he could be like there. And people are probably rolling their eyes when I'm saying, like, if he can just get to like 92, 93 consistently, that's not opening any eyes in 2024. That's not hot velo. But you look at a guy like Logan Webb of the Giants. He sits 92. He just has a great changeup and a good slider. So if you don't need to throw 95, 96, 90, it's nice. I would like that. I think we would all be more excited about Simeon Woods Richardson if he was up there. But yeah, since that's been such a new thing to the minor leagues, I would love to pick at that more. I think it was Eno Saris's little spreadsheet that you can take a look at. And yeah, I think Simeon Woods Richardson was like one of the top 5 AAA Stuff Plus guys. So that model loves the way his pitches interact with each other. So yeah, I just think it could be getting a couple ticks, figuring out, like I said, like sitting down with some of these guys that have success at the major league level, figuring out how to use those pitches and how to sequence and all that stuff. But yeah, he's not a guy, much like Austin Martin. It's kind of the same thing. He's not a guy the Twins should be making any plans for, making any room for. But the Twins haven't had a guy like this all that often.
Right. He needs to get in Pablo Lopez's pitching notebook. Did you guys see that? Yeah. Did you see that, Jeremy, on the Nick Pollock video? It's insane.
I didn't watch it, but I mean that's what I'm thinking. Like, is he a driveline with these other guys?
Yeah.
Good question.
Is he running a sweeper? Is he? Yeah. Yeah, and then like you said, when he's been, trying to do the Olympics and this and that and getting traded, maybe that kind of disrupts some of those off-season plans too of, there's lots of real life stuff going on along with baseball. Obviously that's these guys' primary focus, but
But even on a way simpler thing, you're in the Met system. You're being told we're going to work on this. Now you're in the Blue Jays system.
Yeah, for sure.
You're going to work on this. Now you're in the Twins system. How many guys are playing for 3 different organizations by the time they're 21 years old?
Not many.
Like that's just I think things just need to slow down for him, and he goes back to being a pitcher because he was a very well thought of prospect by everybody. He was a consensus top 100 prospect before 2020, before 2021 or 2020. 2021.
I love his mound presence too. He is a guy who like talks to himself and is like nodding. He's just a high energy, fired
Chris
up.
Archer type.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. He seems like he'd be a fun dude to be a teammate of.
Right on, man. Well, that's gonna do us, man. We could keep going all day.
We could.
This is super fun. Tom, thanks so much for being so generous with your time. Encourage everyone to check out Tom's YouTube channel, which you can find at, what is it, TF Twins?
Yep.
Content all year round, whether there's news or no news that you're going to want to check out. As always, ways that you can support the show via downloads, retweets, positive reviews on your podcast platform of choice. We will be back next week with another guest. Can we drop who this guest is, Jeremy? I think we can.
If you confirmed it, I don't know why you wouldn't.
Okay, we can't. Okay, so next week we're moving on to the Cubs, and we are going to be joined by Matt Trueblood, the new editor-in-chief at Twins Daily, Brewer Fanatic, and Northside Baseball. Should be super fun. Also writes a baseball prospectus. So we're going to keep on plowing through all 3 of these systems. As always, thanks to producer Theo for keeping everything running smooth behind the scenes. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll catch you next week.